let's say this is a simple application. Let's assume this is a standard SAP application provided by SAP. So you cannot directly change this program without entering the access code. So for the time being, even though this is a program I've developed, let's assume this is a standard SAP program. So there's some code in this program. The functionality of this application is, if I input two numbers here, this will multiply these two numbers and show me the result. So this is the standard functionality provided by this application. So if you want to multiply two numbers, you can use this application. Now, in my company, I have a specific requirement where I don't want to multiply these numbers, but I want to add these numbers. Whatever numbers I input on the screen, I want to add these two numbers instead of multiplying. That's the functionality I want. Whereas the standard SAP program is multiplying the numbers. And my user says, for our requirement, we should not multiply, but we should be adding these numbers. Right? Let's assume that's our company specific requirement. So since this application is multiplying the numbers, I cannot use this application to do my in my organization, right? Basically, because I want the numbers to be added. So what options do we have to customize this now? If I say modification, I'll directly go to the source code of this program and modify the code. So here, if I instead of star, if I say plus, then it will add the numbers. So this is modification, where you are modifying the standard SAP code. What's the problem you'll face if you modify? Now, when I upgrade the system or when I implement these support packages, then the new program, the standard SAP program, will come and replace this program. Since the new program will still have the code to multiply, my changes that I'm making here would be lost. So again, it will be becoming star here instead of plus, because the standard SAP program is having star. So the new program, which is replacing my current program in the system, would have star again. So after upgrading, again I need to go back and change this program to plus. Right? So if you are doing too many modifications in your system, then it becomes a very big headache to upgrade your system. If you after upgrading, you have to come back and redo all those changes, all those modifications you have done, because all of them would be lost. Right? So if you haven't done any modifications, let's say your upgrade project will take 1 month to complete, but if you have done too many modifications, your upgrade project may take 6 months to complete. Right? So you might have to spend 6 months in upgrading the system. So that's why many companies don't prefer modifying the standard SAP program. So modifying this program is ruled out. So I don't want this to be my first option. Then what other options do we have if I want to get the same functionality? The other option is customer enhancements. So how does this enhancement concept work? In the standard SAP program, if SAP has provided, if it has maintained the logic this way, there is no way you can enhance this application. So I would say there are no enhancements available for this application. But the same thing, if SAP, for example, we have something called a function module. I'm not too sure how many of you understand, so don't bother understanding. I'll just create one function module. So what I can do is, in the main program, SAP, instead of maintaining this program logic this way, if they call one function module and pass this data to this function module and get back the result, So instead of directly maintaining the logic here in the main program, if they're calling one function module here, if I execute this main program, it will still do the same thing. It is still multiplying these numbers. So the result is 6, right? But here, as a customer, if SAP has maintained their programming logic this way, so this is what I mean by openings in the code. Now, if I want to add these numbers, I don't have to change anything in the main program. I can keep this main program code as it is. Without modifying this main program, I can simply modify this function module which is called in the main program. So this would be in your customer namespace when they provide this as an enhancement. Here, if I change it from start to plus, I'm changing this in a different program outside the main program. This is a completely different program, but this is called in the main program. So here I've changed it from start to plus. The main program code remains the same. So I'm not modifying anything in the main program. Now if I execute this, if I give 2 and 3 here, now instead of multiplying, it is adding the numbers. So I'm getting the functionality I need without actually changing the code of my main program, right? So this is how the enhancement works, right? So there are different enhancement techniques we use. So based on how this opening is provided, we call it either a user exit or a customer exit or a body, right? So we have different enhancement techniques available. So we'll be discussing about these enhancements in great detail later. There are so many other things you need to know before I talk about enhancements. So modification means you are directly changing the code. Enhancement means SAP has provided some openings. In this case, the opening is provided as a call to one function module. So you are actually changing the code in the function module without changing anything in the main program. Since this code gets executed when the main program runs, you are getting the functionality you need. So that's how enhancements are provided. So we are actually getting the functionality we need without actually changing the main program. Now customer developments, I don't want to modify, and let's say this main program is not calling any functional module, so there are no enhancements available. Then they have maintained the logic this way. So obviously I cannot enhance this. So what I'll do is, since I don't want to modify and there are no enhancements available, I can develop a new application in which I can add the numbers. So I can develop my new application and tell my user that don't use the standard SAP application for your job, use this new application which I've developed. So if you want to create a material and if the standard SAP application is not letting you capture that extra information, don't use the standard SAP application. I've developed a new application for you which works just like this standard SAP application, and along with the option to capture that extra information. So use this new application to create a material. So you can develop your own applications also. So these are the different ways you can customize the standard SAP software. Any questions? Vivek? Vivek, you have a question?
Hello.
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
See, in the main app source itself, we have called that function. So we are modifying the main source code itself.
No. I'm just telling you that assuming if SAP has maintained the code this way, they've already maintained the code this way, they're already calling this function module. This is a Z program, custom program I developed, but I'm just trying to give you an example. So if the main program was maintained this way, then I can achieve my functionality without changing anything in the main program.
So that function you are changing?
I'm changing the function module.
Okay, okay, fine, thanks.
So my main program code remains the same. So even if I upgrade, I won't be losing anything because the new program will also have the same code. So I haven't changed anything. So my changes would not be lost.
Okay, understood. Okay, thanks.
And those who don't understand what is this function module, what code I'm typing, don't worry. This is just one example to show you how things work. Right? So you can ignore all this. As long as you understand the concept, that's sufficient. Subba Reddy? Subha Reddy, you have a question?
It's okay, nothing.
Okay. You can lower your hand. Those who are done with your questions, please lower your hand. Gopi?
Hi, Kiran.
Yeah.
What if the function module is also a standard one?
No.
Can we
If
change
if the function module is also standard one, then it's not called enhancement. In enhancement, these function modules will be in your customer namespace. For example, if you want to see this, I'm sorry. If you look at this program, all these customer exits will be called as call customer with this statement. And the letters from A to X are reserved for SAP. So if you see any program or anything that is starting with any alphabet from A to X, then that's a standard SAP program. So this is which one? 001. So here if you see. So if you look at this function module name, it's starting with R. That means it's a standard SAP program. All the customer development should take place in customer namespace, that is Y or Z. If the program name is starting with Y or Z, then it's a customer program. So that's why if you see this program when I created, I started the name with Z, right? Because this is the customer namespace. If I don't start the program name with Y or Z, then it will ask me for an access key, because the system will assume that I'm trying to create a standard program, standard SAP program. So all the customer development should be in the customer namespace. That is, they should start with Z or Y. And when you upgrade the system, all the Z programs will not be affected with the upgrade. Right? So at this point in this main program, this is a main program starting with R. They are calling something called call customer function. Right? At this point, they are calling this function module. They are exporting some data. It's importing some data. Right? Now, this function module here, if you see, has a Z include program in it. So I won't be directly writing my code inside this function module. I'll be writing whatever code in this Z include program. Now, since this is a Z program, this is in the customer namespace. So this won't be affected by the upgrade. So you can only use these enhancements if they are provided by SAP, and SAP provides these enhancements this way, where they'll be calling one function module. Within that function module, there will be one Z include program. So you'll be writing your code in that Z program. So when this main program runs, that function module will be called, and that when that function module is called, your code gets executed. So since the code you're writing is still in the customer namespace, your changes would not be lost when you upgrade the system. Okay?
Okay. So you mean to say if the function module is also a standard one and doesn't have any Z program or Z functionalities over there, means we need to create a new application, right?
Either you create a new application or you have to modify it. You cannot enhance it.
Okay.
Okay. So it's not mandatory that every standard SAP application will have the options to enhance. They are available only if SAP has anticipated. If SAP felt that certain organizations want to do things differently, let me leave an opening, only then we can use those openings. If SAP is not providing the enhancement, then we cannot do anything. The only option we have would be either to modify the standard application or develop our own application. Okay? So it's not mandatory that every application should have some enhancements available.
Thank you.
Please lower your hand if you're done with your question.
Hey Kiran, I was wondering if you could also display the transaction name as well as your explaining the SAP sessions, please.
That's okay for this session, as long as you're understanding the concept, that's sufficient. Obviously, I would
that
be
will
telling
help us revise
I would be telling you
cool.
all the
Thank you.
transactions I use when I start the review process. Sampath?
Yeah, Kiran. Usually, if we won't be modifying the SAP standard programs. Is that what you're saying? Is it?
Generally, we don't prefer because, as I said, if you modify the programs, when you upgrade the system, all your changes would be lost. So that becomes a big headache. So once you upgrade, you have to come back and reapply those modifications. So if you have done too many modifications, it becomes very difficult to manage your software. So that's why we avoid modifications.
Yeah, so if the function module is available, then you will go for the enhancement, otherwise you will go for the customized program.
Yeah, if I have the enhancement options available, then I would prefer enhancing it. If they are not available, and I would modify. Instead of modifying, what we generally do is, for example, what I can do is, let's assume this is the standard SAP application, and instead of modifying the standard SAP application, what I can do is simply copy this application, copy this program. Let's say 1. I'll copy everything. So I don't need to rewrite all the code the standard SAP is providing, and simply do whatever I want to do in this copied program, right? So my user, instead of using this program, he'll be using this new program. So I don't need to develop everything from the scratch. I can simply copy the standard program and then make the necessary changes in the copy so that the standard program still remains intact. Right?
Okay. And one more thing, the customized program starts with name Z. What about Y? What is the difference between Z and Y?
Generally, the production programs, we use Z. For test programs, we use Y.
Okay.
Okay, so both Y and Z you can use. So in a company, when you develop new programs, we use Z. But if you are creating some test programs, then you can use Y.
Okay.
Atul? Atul, your voice is very faint. Could you speak a bit louder?
Okay, Kiran, wanted to ask you if you make any changes in standard function module, or you just copy your function module and do your changes?
Again, anything standard, if you are modifying, if you change the code, then it's called modification. So once you upgrade, even those would be lost, right? So modification need not be only to a program. It could be to a table, a function module, anything. So we don't prefer modifications. So if there are no enhancements, the other option I would look at is try to copy the program and make changes in my copied program rather than changing the main program directly, the standard program directly. Okay. Basha, you have a question? Kaushik?
Yeah, I'm getting about this function. Just told about function something, a standardized function whichever. Can you please tell a little bit about this function?
That's okay, don't worry. No, for you to understand what is a function module, there are so many other things you need to know in ABAP, so ignore it.
Exactly.
I'm just trying to tell you that this is how you can provide a functionality in the program. Either I can maintain the logic directly, or I can call something called a function module and maintain the logic in a function module. So
okay, like in other programming language, this particular program also has a main method or a main function, something like this.
yeah, don't worry about all that technical aspects. Just try to understand the concept. Have you understood the difference between modifying something and enhancing something?
Yes, I got
That's
that.
enough. Yeah, that's sufficient for now. Okay. So as I said, I cannot discuss anything about ABAP because there are so many other things you need to know before I can talk about these function modules or anything I'm using today. So we'll be discussing all this in detail later when the time comes, so don't worry about it. So that's the basic difference between modifying a program, developing your own programs, or enhancing a standard SAP program. So I hope that part is clear for you. So to do any of these things, as you have just seen, you need somebody who understands ABAP. Now, that's where we pitch in as an ABAP consultant. Since every company will be customizing the software, many companies, like in our company, we have up to 30% customization. That means we are using 70% of what is provided by SAP, and around 30% we have customized because the standard SAP functionality does not meet our requirements. Then few companies have up to 70% customization, like Nestle has almost 70% customization. So depending from company to company, it varies how much customization you need. But every company will have some customization. So since every company will be customizing this standard SAP software to meet their requirements, that means every company needs an ABAP consultant, right? So as an ABAP consultant, every company needs an ABAP consultant. There won't be any company which has implemented SAP and doesn't require an ABAP consultant. Right? So you would always, ABAP consultants are always required to maintain the, or to develop new applications or to change the existing applications. Other modules, for example, if you take a look at CRM, a company which wants to use CRM will need a CRM resource. If they don't want to use CRM, they don't need a CRM resource. But ABAP resource, any company which is implementing SAP, they would need an ABAP resource. So here you can see modification. You're directly modifying the program. In enhancement, you're adding your code to the standard program using the openings provided by SAP. So you're not actually modifying the program, you're simply adding your extra code to enhance the program. So that's what is enhancement. And customer developments, we do it in the customer namespace, so where you're developing something from the scratch. So modifications, changes to SAP objects such as programs and table definitions are called modifications. The repository delivered by SAP is not only extended but changed. When you next upgrade your system or when importing support packages, you will therefore need to check these modifications against the repository. Okay, so I said we don't generally prefer modifying the programs, but there is one situation where we don't mind modifying these programs. That situation is, for example, let's say I have implemented this SAP software in India. My company is in India. I'm using this software in India. If the change that I need is specific to my company, then SAP doesn't provide any consulting services. So I need to recruit an ABAP consultant who can either modify the program, enhance the program, or create a new program. Right? So if the change is specific to my company. Now, some law has changed in India, and that has affected all the companies that are running in India. So the change that we need to the program is not specific to a company, it's specific to a country or a region, wherein all the companies running in India would need that change in their programs. In such case, SAP releases these nodes or support packages, wherein they'll be implementing those changes in the program and they'll be releasing it. In that case, you can modify the program to implement whatever SAP has recommended. So if SAP itself is telling that there's a bug in this program which we have delivered, please change the code at this line number to this line, then I don't mind modifying because SAP is including that in their release. So when I upgrade, the new program would anyway have those changes in them. So I won't be losing anything. So in that case also we modify. So if the changes that are required to the software are affecting more than one country, one company, if it's a more region-specific change, then SAP releases them as the support packages. You can think of it just like a Windows update. Once you install Windows, frequently you'll be getting these Windows updates. Whenever Microsoft finds some loopholes in their software, they'll be releasing these updates, right? The same way SAP also releases this updates as support packages. So if you have modified your programs, then you'll be losing all that when you upgrade the system or when you implement these support packages. Enhancements. In this type of change, you add customer-specific objects to the repository. There are specific places in the coding known as customer exits. We have user exits, customer exits, bodies. All these are different enhancement techniques, which we'll be discussing in detail later, where you can supplement the standard SAP system with your own objects. And there's also one modern method for the customer-specific enhancements called business add-ins. That's bodies. So we have user exits, customer exits, bodies, enhancement points, enhancement spots. All these are the different enhancement techniques that we use to enhance the standard SAP software. So how this opening is provided is what differentiates whether I call that a user exit or a customer exit or a body. Right? So these are your enhancements. As I said, we'll be discussing these enhancements in detail later. There are so many other things you need to know before I talk about these enhancements. Then customer developments. In the SAP system, you can create your own repository objects such as tables, programs, transactions. You can create pretty much everything that you want in the SAP system. All customer developments normally take place in customer namespace. The only restriction is the program name or whatever you're creating should start with either Z or Y. So all objects created by customers should start with Y or Z. So that's your customization. So these are the different ways in which we customize the standard SAP software. So any questions so far on this customizing? Now, since we are running out of time, I'll quickly talk about the different types of applications that we'll be developing. Sunil, you have a question before that? Sunil, do you have a question?
Actually, this is regarding upgrading the system. So while we are upgrading the system, what about the Y or Z programs?
They won't be affected because they won't be available in the standard SAP package, right? So only what is provided by SAP will be upgraded. And when you upgrade, it's not mandatory that every program will be replaced. Depending on the changes, SAP could still be using the old applications only in the new system also. For example, if you look at this MM01 transaction, it's available in 5.0 system, 4.0 system, 6.0 system. So it's the same. They haven't made any changes. But there could be few other programs for which they have made changes. So those would be lost. And
what about the functional changes? Previously, you took one example.
The data would not be affected when you upgrade. So whatever customizing you are doing to your system, those are typically saved as some, they are updated in some tables, the data. So that won't be affected. Only the repository objects, the programs, table definitions, those get affected with the upgrade. The data that you have in your system won't be affected.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, Subha Reddy, you have a question?
Yeah, what about the extensions? What are the color?
I'll be coming to that. I'll just share this slide. So, what type of developments that you do as an ABAP consultant? If you have looked at any job postings for ABAP, you would typically see good knowledge in RICF objects. So, by RICF, they means reports, interfaces, conversions, extensions, and forms. So anything that you develop in your SAP system, you can categorize that into one of these. Either you'll be developing reports or interface programs or conversion programs or extensions or forms. So we'll see these reports. For example, you want to see all the bank transactions that you have done in last month. What you'll do, you'll log into your bank website and then open the statement link, enter the date range for which you want to see the statement, click submit. That application will fetch all the transactions between the given date range and show some output. That's a typical report. Whenever you do a transaction, the bank stores that information in their database, and this application will query that database, fetch the data as per your date range and show you the output. Right? So that's a typical report. So reports typically provide read-only access to the database. Right? When you're looking at the bank statement, you can only see the data that is saved. You cannot create a new transaction. You cannot change the data that you see. It's a read-only access to your data. So, for example, let's say we have a warehouse where I store all the stock, and again, when we maintain this inventory, we again follow different process. One process is SOI, supplier owned inventory, wherein I don't buy everything that I want to sell. My supplier will give me the goods. For example, if I'm an electronics showroom, I'm selling washing machines, color televisions, then I don't need to buy all these washing machines and color televisions beforehand and then sell it to my customer. If I'm following this SOI process, what I'll do is, the supplier who's supplying me this washing machine or the color television, he would keep his stock in my warehouse, and he would say, whenever you sell this to your customer, at that time you can pay me for that. Till that time, the inventory is owned by me. You don't own it, but I can keep it in your warehouse so that the moment you get an order, you can ship it to your customers. Now, the problem with this type of arrangement is, let's say there are 5 different showrooms in the city. I'm doing very less business. I'm hardly selling 1 washing machine per month, but other showrooms are selling 30 washing machines per month, and the same supplier is supplying these washing machines to everyone. In that case, I have some 10 washing machines lying in my warehouse which I'm not able to sell, but other showrooms, they are actually falling short of washing machines. Whatever the supplier has given them, they've exhausted that and they want more washing machines. And here in my warehouse, there are 10 lying idle. So it would be better if the supplier can move these washing machines from my warehouse to another warehouse for another vendor or another showroom. It would make more sense, right? So the supplier says, because of this problem, I'll keep this washing machine in your warehouse, but you pay me when you sell it to your customer or after 30 days, whichever is earlier. Within 30 days, if you're selling it good, you can pay me. If you're not selling it for 30 days, I'll assume that it is sold, so you have to pay me. So this becomes billable if you reach 30 days from the day you received it in your warehouse. Now, as a warehouse manager, I need to know the age of my inventory so that I can take a decision whether I should return this back to the supplier or I should pay the supplier, because I'll be billable if I cross 30 days, right? So whenever I receive the stock in my warehouse, I'll be updating in the system the date in which I received that particular washing machine, right? So my user says, I want you to create one report where you can check all the stock available in the warehouse and calculate the age. You can simply subtract the current date from the date we received. That gives you the number of days since we received that particular product in our warehouse. So just show me that age of the inventory. So since all this data is already there in the database, I can simply create one report wherein I can use the data stored in the database, apply the logic of calculating the age in my report, and then show it to the user saying that this particular washing machine we received 20 days back, this one we received 15 days back. So based on that, my manager can take a decision whether to pay the supplier or return it to the supplier, right? So you create such type of reports in SAP. So you can create simple reports to very complex reports in ABAP. So we have something called classical reports. We have ALV reports. Again, the reports can be normal reports or interactive reports. So you can create an interactive classical report, an interactive ALV report. So you can create from very simple report to very complex reports in ABAP. And reports are something which you'll be working on very frequently. So reports and forms are two developments you'll be working on very frequently as an ABAP consultant. 80% of the times you'll be creating either reports or forms as an ABAP consultant. So these are very frequent developments that we'll get to work on. So these are your typical report developments where all the data is already there in the database. We are extracting that data to make some sense out of that data. Then interface programs. What are these interface programs? Anything you want to push from your SAP system to an external system, or you are receiving some data from the external system and you want to post that data in your SAP system. So for that requirements, we need to create these interface programs. We have outbound interface, inbound interface programs. In inbound interface, you are receiving the data from the external system, and you'll be creating a program to use that data and post the information in your SAP system. For example, let's say I gave you one example that I'm running a business where I'm manufacturing these laptop computers, right? To procure the raw material, I need to place an order with Intel to procure the motherboards, right? So I can create one purchase order and send it to Intel. And let's say Intel bills me, they'll send me one invoice, billing document. And Intel will create this billing document and send it to me. So I'm exchanging some data between my system and my business partner system. In this case, Intel is the business partner. So how do we exchange this data? If Intel is sending me an invoice, then one way is take a printout of the invoice and courier it to me. But that's a very time-consuming process. It takes a lot of time, right? You waste 1 or 2 days in that process. All these companies exchange data through an electronic medium. We have something called EDI for that. So what we do is, the moment Intel sends me this information, they can directly pass this data to my system. And in my system, it will trigger one program which will use this data and create a billing document in my system using that data. So that is an inbound interface program where you are receiving data from an Excel system, and using that data, you're creating something in your SAP system. That's a typical inbound interface program. And you are sending a purchase order to Intel. Then I'll create this purchase order in the system, and I can run one program which will extract this purchase order data and push it to the other system, my business partner system. That's an outbound interface program. So any data you want to exchange between your SAP system and an external system, we develop this interface program. So we have normal interface programs where you simply extract data from the system and store it in one folder in the application server. Now what is application server, you'll understand tomorrow. Or else we have this BAPIs, business APIs. How many of you understand what is an API? You can raise your hand. What is an API? Tatmi? Padma Kumar? Padma Kumar?
Yes, application programming interface.
So what exactly that means?
Hello? Basically, it is a function prototype using which you can call functions and execute.
Okay. For example, let's say I'm creating my website. In my website, I want to provide some search functionality for my users. So whoever visits my website, they want to do a Google search. They want to search for something. So I want to, like Google, I also want to provide some search functionality. For that, either I can maintain all the algorithm for this search in my server. So whenever you search for something, it executes this program code and tries to find the matching entries for your search and show you that. So I can do that myself. Or else I can simply leverage my whatever is provided by Google. So if Google is providing an API wherein the moment you type a search query in my website and click on search, I can call this API provided by Google, send my search query to this API. This API will execute in the Google server and it will fetch all the relevant results for that query and give back me the result, which I can simply display in my website. So all the searching is done by the Google server. But obviously you cannot access the Google server directly. So Google has to provide something called as a API, application programming interface. So using that interface, I can exchange some data between my server and the Google server. So if two different systems want to interact with each other, then there should be some way to do that, and these are typically provided as APIs. So in SAP also we provide this API. So if one external system wants to do something in your SAP system, then we provide this. We develop these APIs. We call them BAPIs, business APIs, and these APIs are typically implemented as function modules in SAP. So those are also you will be developing as interface program. So all this comes under interface program. So we'll be learning all that, how to develop inbound interface, outbound interface, how to develop these BAPIs. So all these things we'll be learning in this course. Then we have these conversion programs. Let's say you are implementing the SAP system for the first time, and it doesn't mean that this is the first time you're using a system. You could be using some other system before implementing SAP, and you have already maintain all the data about your materials, about your customers, about your vendors. So all this data is already stored in your existing system. Now when you implement SAP for the first time, this data that you have in your legacy system should be moved to your SAP system, right? You cannot simply copy and paste the data. There should be some validations that should be performed. The data should be converted to SAP format. For example, in SAP, the material number is an alphanumeric value with up to 18 characters. In your legacy system, you could be using something else, right? So this has to be converted to a format that is used in SAP. So for those requirements, we'll be using these conversion programs. So we have something called LSMW, which is a tool provided by SAP, using which you can easily push data from your legacy system to your SAP system. Or we can develop these BDC programs. All these are your conversion programs. So we'll also be learning all that, how to develop these conversion programs, BDCs, LSMWs, and all those things. So that's your conversion programs. Then extensions, all the enhancements that you do, modifications that you do, the new developments that you do in the system, all this comes under extensions. So where you are extending the standard SAP functionality, right? So that comes under extension. So everything comes under this extension. And there are a few third-party applications also which you can integrate with your SAP system. So you can also install those third-party applications to integrate. For example, let's say you want to go in the field and take orders. Obviously, you cannot carry your laptop and log into the SAP system and take the order directly, right? So my sales guy, he'll be carrying one handheld device to capture the orders. So if you have seen this Pepsi or Coke salespeople, they'll go to each shop and take the orders. So they'll be capturing that information in one handheld device. So they'll take all the orders in one handheld device, and once they come back to office, all they have to do is connect that handheld device to the system, and all the data would be posted in your SAP system. So for that, we use these third-party applications which will do that. So that also you can use with your SAP system. Then forms, these are, as I said, frequent developments, one of the frequent developments. So when you create a purchase order, for example, this is a typical report. So this is how the report output will look, something like this. But these reports have some limitations on how much you can print, how much formatting you can do in the output. But sometimes when we create these documents, the user says, okay, I'm creating this purchase order in the system or this billing document in the system, and I want to take a printout of this document. He's creating this document in the system, and he says, I want to take a printout. And since these are all legal documents, there are some legal requirements. An invoice should have this mandatory information. This is how the format should be of the invoice. There's a standard format that we follow. So we need to create that in a standard format.